So what I put together today is the waiver that you all have been operating under since COVID came in and they put the state of emergency in. It expired last night at 11:59. So most of you got a letter from DHSR telling you that it was going to expire, and they went over in detail some of the elements there. So I want to be sure that you all know that those special provisions that you were operating under are no longer valid as of today. And I'm going to just review those for you. One of the things they had in place was that your annual evaluations that you do once a year to evaluate the whole operation, it was put on hold. And this says that you need to start doing that again 30 days after the state of emergency has ended. So if it's ending today on May 12th, then by June 12th, you need to get an annual evaluation of your total operation done. Most of you have a form that you use in order to do that. If you work with me, I know you have a form. So make sure that you get that done and you get one on file. And I think I would also put something in there that says the reason that they weren't done in the last couple of years was because this moratorium was in place. I'm going to call DHSR and be sure that they don't want you to go back and do those other years. I would think not, because that just wouldn't be helpful to you. But make sure you get one in for 2022 up until now, and then just start. So that's one of the things that is expired. It's no longer on hold. You need to get that evaluation in order. Whenever you expand your territory, there is a 30-day notice where you're supposed to notify the state that you're going to go into another county, or if you were going to add some additional services, you have to send them a letter 30 days in advance and say that we're going to do this. Well, during this state of emergency, you didn't have to do that. You could, if you could get to, if you added a service or whatever, you didn't have to give them the 30-day notice. They still wanted a notice, but it didn't have to be there in 30 days. So now just keep in mind, we're just going back to the way things were before the state of emergency. You need to notify of any expansion of services 30 days in advance. The moratorium has expired. Supervisory visits. During this state of emergency, you all were allowed to do supervisory visits by telecommunications. That was either telephone, Zoom, however you were doing that. I don't know how many of you took advantage of that, because I think a lot of you just put your mask on and you just kept going out to the client. But if there were cases where you were doing that over the phone or whatever, that is no longer valid. As of today, if there's a supervisory visit due, you need to go directly to that client's home, do that visit, or if it's companion sitter, you know it's every 6 months that you do that. And on one of those times throughout the year, the aide needs to be in the home. With the in-home aide, it's every 90 days. That is a true 90 days and annually. But if you're going every 90 days, you're going to be there annually, anyway. One of those is going to be an annual visit. So just make sure you're doing those in person starting now, because that doing it as in telecommunications, that has ended. It expired. Your agency records that you have in your office, your client charts, this may apply a little bit more to home health, but you all may remove records from your office at time also. Whenever a client record is removed, and I would say an employee record too, I don't know why that would happen. But if your record is removed from the office, you have a log, client sign out log or an agency record log, you should, where if Nurse Jane wants to take Miss Jones's record with her to do something, she needs to go in that log. It needs to be entered, the date that she logged it out, and 5 days later, it needs to come back. Well, during this period, they allowed you to go ahead and let those individuals take the file with them but they didn't have to bring it back in 5 days, but they needed to be on that log I just spoke of, where you knew that it was Jane Smith that had Miss Jones's file. And if she had it these whole 2 years, then you know she has it and she should bring it back. But now, if they come in the office today and get a file and take it out, it needs to be back in 5 days, 5 business days. On your staff competency, when you do your staff skills validation, that should be done in person. That's how it was before this came about. Well, during the state of emergency, they allowed you, I saw people doing them over Zoom, over FaceTime, and you got by and got through with that. It was okay. But now the demonstration of competency over telecommunications has expired. If your nurse checks off your aide or your companion center for skills, it needs to be in person. And then your geographic services. When you become a licensed agency, your clients should be within 90-minute driving distance of your office location. So while this was going on, the state of emergency, they actually allowed you to go beyond that. If you could communicate with them by phone or however you did that, or FaceTime, you could go beyond that. Well, hopefully you didn't take on a whole bunch of clients outside that area, because now you need to go back to where it is 90 minutes away, and you cannot do it by telecommunications, phone, or any of that. You've got to do it in person. So just be sure that those clients are within that driving distance. And that applies in case of an emergency. And most of you, when you actually got your agency license, you checked on that and you were sure your clients were within that range, but go back to it and make sure that you're following it. Your nurses do an initial assessment for in-home aid services. So those assessments should be conducted in the home by the practitioner. That's usually the RN. They allowed you to do them over the phone, FaceTime, Zoom. However, that has expired. As of today, if you have an admission on your desk, that nurse needs to go and stand in front of that client in their home and do their assessment. As far as job assignments, this was the most interesting one to me. During the state of emergency, they allowed you to, if you had a client that actually needed an in-home aide, meaning they were on the nurse aide registry, they actually allowed you all to use a person that was not on the registry, that may not have the license or whatever. They allowed you to use them in cases where the aide really should be on the registry and they weren't, but your nurse trained them to perform all the duties. They allowed that because there was so much need for people needing help during the state of emergency. As of today, that is no longer valid. So if you have aides out there working with clients and they should actually be on the nurse aide registry, you need to go back through your list and fix that. This is something that you should always be looking at. You know, if it's 2 ADLs that are more than extensive, that are extensive assistance or cognitive impairment, or 3 ADLs that need extensive assistance, then that person's aide needs to be on the North Carolina Nurse Aide Registry. So this is one I think that could get you in a little bit of sticky trouble. So go back and look at this and be sure that you address that. That's basically what I had to cover today. And I'd like to let you all know that I put this information together based on things that I see happening in the industry. And I like to provide it for you every month. However, before you change anything that has to do with your policies and procedures, anything that you do, go to the regulatory agency, go to DHSR, the State Labor Board, whomever governs that area, and verify it with them before you make a change based on anything that I have told you today.